Time, my father rarely visited me in school. With the family relocation to Benin, it became easier for them to come visiting. Hence, Dad occasionally came on visiting days, while the whole family visited on prize giving day or during the end of the year activities. My elder sister Lizzie got admitted into a school in Sapele to continue her education. Taye soon joined me in Edo College in 1967, whilst the rest of the children were enrolled in the government primary school near our temporary abode. While fleeing from the eastern region, people had to find a way around the dismal circumstances. Eventually, to mitigate losses, landlords across the divides arranged swaps. So if one had a house in the east and someone from the east had a home in Benin, they agreed and swapped. Eventually, my parents swapped with someone, and we finally got a place in Benin, number Globadia Street, New Benin. From Chief Ehobamie house, we moved to our new home on Globadia Street. When the Civil War ended, everybody wanted their houses back. So we gave up the Globadia Street house, and my father also recovered his own house in Aba. My father eventually sold the house in Aba, and with time, we got our own place, number 19, Waifo Street, Benin City. Life during the Nigerian Civil War. At 16, there were many things I could have hoped to be doing, and living through war was not one of them. Ready or not, I was caught in the middle when the Nigerian Civil War started in 1967. Most Midwesterners went about with an air of neutrality during the war, because people believed the war was between the Easterners and the Northerners. We, the Midwesterners, would have aligned with the East, but since Ojukwu had asked us to leave, we felt we did not owe him our sympathy. People in the Midwest states detested Ojukwu action. Even as a child, his directive affected me, because my parents were set back by years. We had always felt we were all Nigerians. All of a sudden, that was not the case. The Midwest state remained in the bubble of neutrality until we woke up one day to the news that Biafran soldiers had overrun the Midwest. I was still in Edo College then, and the whole event was quite dramatic. One day, we saw big, lucky, black northern soldiers. The next day, we are seeing Igbo soldiers everywhere. Biafran soldiers in Biafran uniform. And our citizenship changed as quickly as this, from Nigerians to Biafrans. The Biafran soldiers had gone up to Ore, heading towards Lagos, before the Nigerian army intercepted and began to fight with them. For 6 weeks, Midwest State was under the occupation of the Biafran army, and in that period, schools were shut down. The students were asked to go home. The war was our own version of the 2020 COVID-19 situation. Just like this generation will remember the coronavirus pandemic for years, my generation will never forget the Nigerian Civil War. More so, looking at the vices children were exposed to during the period of occupation, massive looting, Biafrans and Nigerians breaking into shops, soldiers casting away food, provisions, and so on. When the Nigerian army came to liberate at least Benin City, it was not pleasant. Innocent Igbo men and women were shot and murdered in cold blood. This was when I first witnessed bloodshed. I still cannot explain how I felt watching that right in Benin City Center as a child. I had gone with other people to look for something to loot. It was a bit too much for a 16-year-old to experience. People should be putting meat fish. And amidst these events, the new channels were watched with reports of the Biafrans being dislodged from here and there. We also kept hearing about the feat of Black Scorpion, Adekule, and Olusegun Obasanjo. Lots of propagandas were flying about. The East were showing very gory pictures of malnutrition, genocide, and children carrying harm. It was all very horrible. That fate in Benin. After we relocated to Benin, my father connected with the Benin branch of the Christ Apostolic Church. Being that he was already an elder in the Enugu branch, the church immediately made him an elder there also. Despite that, he had an encounter with a young man that would also have an impact on his spiritual life. Occasionally, he took us to Bata Shoe Company to buy us school shoes. The salesman was slim, tall, gentle, who enjoyed chatting with his customers while he attended to them. This gentleman would take our feet size, get the shoes, try them on us, while he jovially discussed with my father. The discussion cut across various subjects, but clearly his favorites were those related to spirituality and the Bible. He became very friendly with my dad and would explore passages in the Bible with him, as if my father was unaccustomed to the scriptures. My father loved him and was excited about having someone, a Benin man like himself, whom he could discuss Christianity with. To appreciate this, the context of their relationship was a Benin society that had not entirely opened up to Christianity. Being a Christian in Benin was unusual at that time. Traditional religion and practices were advocated for, and practices like polygamy and idol worship were standard. My father's refusal to accept these made his larger family reject him. It was a complicated situation for him. In light of the status quo, the Bata salesman was indeed like a breath of fresh air to my father. They became like brothers. Every day, while having family devotion as early as 6 o'clock a.m., the shoe salesman would ride his bicycle to our house to join us for morning devotion. He would pray, praise, and share scriptures with us. That went on for a long time. He became close to our entire family and shared a lot of good times with us. Months later, when our church, Christ Apostolic Church, was having its annual convention, my father requested that the church allowed his young friend to preach in one of the sessions. It took some convincing, but the leadership of the church, headed by one Reverend Elgado, eventually agreed. The young shoe salesman was happy when he was informed he would be preaching. I remember he came in a white locally tailored suit and preached his heart that day, holding the audience captive. That was how the young man, wow, who would later be globally known as Archbishop Benson Idahosa, got his first preaching opportunity in a church. After that first preaching experience, Benson Idahosa eventually went on to become a world-renowned charismatic Pentecostal minister. He founded the Church of God Mission International in 1968, and is credited as the father of Pentecostalism in Nigeria. Wow. Benson Idahosa became a regular guest at our church. When he eventually pioneered the Church of God Mission, my father joined him and gave his time, energy, skills, and possessions, including his motorcycle, to the new church. I remember my father by himself made 12 executive chairs that he donated to the Church of God Mission, which the Archbishop proudly arranged on the church altar when an American evangelist, T.L. Osborne, came to the Church of God Mission. My father, now an elder in the church, was one of those who worked closely with him. On the 13th day of November 1976, during a subsequent visit of evangelist T.L. Osborne, Dad was formally ordained into the work of ministry. My father was a passionate Christian. He would memorize various Bible passages as he could read, as he could not read. Nothing less, things changed. People changed. I cannot say specifically what it was, but it seems something got into my father. Perhaps it was the pressure from his extended family. They relentlessly demanded that he should marry a second wife, because in Benin tradition, polygamy was the norm. Men were encouraged to marry more than one wife, because monogamy was seen as a disadvantage to a man. Monogamy was like putting all of one egg in a basket. What happens if the basket is stolen or it falls to the ground? That was the people reasoning. And the average Benin man was warned by his friends and family never to take that chance. My father began to reflect on it, and after a while, his resistance broke. He decided to marry another wife. This puts tremendous pressure on mother till they neared a breaking point. When the Archbishop examined the position of both of them and saw things from my mother's perspective, it was not a case of him taking side. Benson Idahosa was a man who, based on his judgments, on his interpretation of scriptures, and that was what he did in my parents' case. In defiance to the Archbishop's stance, my father left the church and went back to idol worship. Years later, in 1979, he and my mother separated, and he married another young woman who had 3 children for him: Mercy, Ernest, and Usarity. The new wife was heavily involved in idol worship with Dad. Interestingly, it seems my father never really let go of Christianity. At the center of his shrine was his large Bible. At the same time, despite the unease we felt about his religious choice, my father prayed for us with the scriptures whenever we were home. I refused to have anything to do with his idol worship. I believe it was a contradiction, because that day when he threw the totem and idol in the river at Enugu, he said he was doing so I would not inherit those fetish things. As the years went by, he repeatedly told me that he knew I would throw away all the idols when he died. I never replied him, because I knew that he was correct. As soon as he died and we buried him, I sought out a respected man of God in town. I told him that my father was dead and I wanted to burn all the idol objects of worship. The pastor came to our house, entered the shrine, and brought all the idols outside and burned them. He then anointed the whole house and consecrated the compound. Meanwhile, while alive, my father had built another house where his second wife resided. At his demise, I moved her out of the house because it was mine by inheritance. I got one of my younger brothers to live there and made it a general transit home for any family member visiting Benin. Section 2. Benin and a life-changing scholarship. Chapter 4. Benin and Edo College. Benin. Oba Ewaye the Great, 1440 to 1473, the 12th Oba in the line, expanded the already thriving Benin Kingdom territories to surrounding regions. But the kingdom was not always called Benin. During Oba Ewaye time, its administrative center was referred to as Ubini. Ubini was later corrupted to Benin by the Ishekiri, Urobo, and Edo, who lived together at the center. Around 1485, when the Portuguese arrived in an expedition led by João Afonso de Aveiro, they began to pronounce Benin as Bini. The new name stuck, and the center became known as Benin City. Ewaye, who became king through a violent coup against his brother Waifokun, is credited with reforming the Benin Kingdom political structure. He set it on a path of territorial dominance and turns it into a city-state from a military fortress built by the Ogisos, protected by moats and walls. But Benin had a history of prosperity before Ewaye. Excavations reveal it was already flourishing around 1200 to 1300 CE. Nevertheless, Ewaye certainly brought a golden age with its territorial expansion efforts, consolidating the Oba power and creating an administrative structure for the empire. After their first expedition to Benin in 1553, the British could not turn their back on Benin. The lucrative trading and exporting of ivory, palm oil, pepper, and later slaves drove them to explore Benin more and more. With time, those who visited the 16th and 19th century could not but return to England with fascinating tales of the great Benin, a city of noble buildings ruled by a powerful king. A Dutch illustrator aptly depicted the ancient Benin in a publication by historians and geographers. Ofet Dapper, now Kerrig, Besuj the Afrikansik, Gewastin, Description of Africa, was published in Amsterdam in 1668. The work states about the royal palace of the Oba. The king court is square and located on the right-hand side of the city. As one enters it through the gates of Goton, it is about the same size as the city of Amle, led by a special wall, comparable to the one which encircles the town. It is divided into many magnificent palaces, houses, and apartments of the courtiers, and comprises beautiful and long squares with galleries, about as large as the exchange at Amsterdam. The buildings are of different sizes, however, resting on wooden pillars from top to bottom, lined with copper cast, on which pictures of their war exploits and battles are engraved. All of them are being very well maintained. Most of the buildings within this court are covered with palm leaves instead of with square plank, and every roof is adorned with a small spiral tower on which casted copper beds are standing, being very artfully sculpted and lifelike with their wings spread. When Benin was at its strongest, it dominated trade along the entire coastline, from the western Niger Delta through Lagos to the Kingdom of Great Accra, modern-day Ghana. This is why the coastline was named the Bight of Benin. The present-day Republic of Benin, formerly Dahomey, decided to choose this Bight name as its country name. Benin Kingdom was all-conquering. The Western Igbo, Ijo, Ichekiri, Ika, Isoko, Urobo, plus the Eastern Yoruba tribe of Ondo, Ekiti, Mai or Ugbo, and Ijebu were all ruled by the kingdom. Benin also conquered what eventually became the city of Lagos, hundreds of years before the British took over in 1851. However, there is a part of Benin history that was as prominent as its territorial dominance, its spirituality steeped in traditional religion, occultism, and superstitions. Shrines hanging on doorposts, fetish, paraphernalias, people wearing wrappers with chalks marked all over their bodies, sacrifices composed of butchered chicken, coconuts, and lots more were some sites that would have become a first-time visitor, that would have welcomed a first-time visitor to Benin in the yesteryears. At the time, the Beninese were still embittered by Britain rule in the exile of Oba Ovurame, and so they relied solely on their ancestral belief and did not give room for the white man religion. Ovurame was king of the Benin Kingdom from 1888 to 1897. He would have ruled longer, but for Britain intrusion, which led to his being exiled to Calabar in 1897. The Beninese quickly learned the importance of having a strong union or body, so they formed or joined the Ogboni and Owegbe society. While the Ogboni society has its origin in the western region of Nigeria, its membership extended to the Midwest states, including Benin. The Owegbe, on the other hand, was a mostly Benin society formed in the opposition to the Ogboni to break their seeming monopoly. Both societies were exclusive clubs with varied political, economic, spiritual, security, and other benefits. Though significantly reduced by modernity and the influence of colonialism, Benin's spiritual culture remained until I was born and up till the time I moved to Edo College. There is an account I recollect of an event that happened during the Nigerian Civil War, precisely in 1967. Some Biafran soldiers had overrun the Midwest states and gained access to Ore, which they occupied for about 6 weeks. These soldiers were raping women, exploiting the villagers, and committing, is that the water? Yeah. And committing all manners of crimes and atrocities until they got to one Benin village where they met their nemesis. The head of the village placed a cost on the soldiers, saying that any of them who tried to violate their women would develop a swollen scrotum. Of course, the Biafrans did not believe this, and so some brazenly went ahead to commit the crime. Fear came upon the soldiers as the errant soldier were afflicted, just as the village head had predicted. The resulting swollen scrotum, which burst through the offending soldier's trousers, was sufficient warning that the village head meant business and Benin women were not to be toyed with. That was how potent Benin Juju was famed to be. And all of this influenced my earliest memory of the city as a diabolical one. It got so bad that some people were afraid of associating with Benin folks. Due to this profiling, I often avoided telling anyone I am from Benin. In Edo College then, every student were required to join one ethnic or cultural dance group. I always joined the Igbo group. And when it was holiday time, I never stayed behind in the city. The moment school vacated, I went back to Enugu until my parents were forced to relocate to Benin, and I no longer had anywhere to run to. It took God's intervention, using Archbishop Bensi Idausa to curb Benin fetishes. These days, the presence of shrines are not a commonplace as before. Adherents of the traditional religion still exist, but they are few and not as visible. Christianity has taken over, and close to 85% of Beninese have embraced it. The Oba Palace, however, remained the custodian of the traditional religion, journeying to Benin. It was the legendary Jamaica political activist and Pan-Africanist Marcus Garvey who said, "A people without the knowledge of their history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots." A tree without roots is either dead or on its way to doing so. So, like I wrote earlier, to prevent a situation where I would be like this proverbial tree, my parents decided Benin was the rightful environment for my secondary school education. But there were limitations. They did not know anything about Benin school or anyone who could help me get into one. So on my own, at the age of 14, I began to make inquiries about the secondary schools available in different parts of the country. At the time, government colleges were the top institution nationwide. And to get admitted into any one of them, one had to sit for the common entrance examination. The examination was introduced to provide a general basis for primary school pupils to be admitted to government colleges. A pupil planning to write this exam could select 3 schools, the primary choice and 2 other options. If you were not admitted into your primary choice, the other 2 were there to fall back on. After making my findings, I chose Edo College, Benin City, a premium government institution as my primary choice, or better put, my parents chose it. While my other options were Government College, Umuahia, and St. Patrick College, Asaba. Fortunately, I passed the common entrance for Edo College and was offered admission. At the time, my father was the president of Benin Union in Enugu, and it became part of him to galvanize the Beninese everywhere he went. At the same time, the then immediately past Oba of Benin, Prince Akenzua, was the district officer in Enugu, and he was the patron of the Benin Union. The after effect of this was that the Oba and my father naturally had a lot of dealings together, and closely too. Not many events can mark a gradual and proud transition to adulthood, like gaining admission into secondary school. More so, when it is into a premier school like Edo College. Armed with my new metal suitcase, my first pair of shoes, some cooked rice for the road, and my mother as escort, I embarked on the journey to resume secondary school. I remember going in a 911 truck, and it took us 11 hours to get to Benin. The truck had benches at the back with trampoline to cover the top. Subsequently, spaces were never enough every time I had to travel. The vehicles were always overbooked. Children had to stand, while the elders would see through the journey. Regardless, the trip to Benin from Enugu still fascinates me. Passing through the Melekin Hill Road, a road that links Enugu through Unwo to Onitsha, was always interesting. The road is over 3 kilometers and was initially constructed in 1909. It is sharply undulating and defined by steep, abrupt curves with rocks and vegetation on one side and a valley, the Iva Valley, on the other side. A misstep by an inexperienced or less cautious driver could mean tumbling into the valley. Suffice it to say that we usually had our hearts in our mouth whenever we reached the Melekin Hill. Another exciting highlight of my travels then was seeing the Oji River town. There is something symbolic about this town. It is the site of the Oji River Thermal Power Station, a power plant powered by coal. Coal was usually conveyed from Ekulu and Oyema coal mine to the Oji River Thermal Power Plant and channeled into the national grid. At Oji River, we would often see a cable car coming up from the mines, going to God knows where. That was how coal was conveyed from the coal mines in a cable car or cart. The setup generated up to 10 megawatts of electricity, which was supplied to the plant's immediate vicinity. All the passengers often look forward to the intrusion sight of big cart moving on a tiny cable overhead. It was something to remember. The Niger Bridge had not yet been constructed as at 1965, so the only way to cross from Onitsha to Asaba was by ferry. I remember 2 ferries then. One was called Shanuam and the other Eriko Shanuam. A rudimentary science was required to cross the river Niger then. The ferries were self-propelled raft or barges with a ramp, and the ramp had to land on the scope first. Then the passengers disembarked from the vehicle. Next step was for the vehicle to go into the ferry. after which the passengers would get on the same ferry. The ferry would then take us to Asaba, where both vehicle and passengers were alight to continue their journey to Benin. It was quite an exciting experience, though as a child it was scary. It took about 40 minutes to cross from Onitsha to Asaba. Transporter did this regularly, converging people to and